want to welcome you all to the Local Legends event. It has been an amazing run so far, and it's just thrilling to be able to honor somebody who over the course of my years working with the museum has become a very good friend. You'll find out a lot more about Joanna Rolek and all that she does. She tends to be out of the spotlight, but doing amazing things to put other people into the spotlight. And it is an incredible pleasure to honor her with our Local Legends Award. And she is going to be interviewed by the amazingly dapper and talented David Sweet, who has done this for us before and has been an amazing supporter as well of the museum. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you two.
All right. Well, thank you, Carol. Anyway, Joanna, great to see you. We haven't seen each other since our lunch at Dimitri's a few months ago, which was a lot of fun. And as the executive director of the Chamber, you know well that most of our businesses are closed on Sunday, but there is one that was open today. It's called the Chicago Bears. Did you happen to see what happened in that game?
I did not, but I'll tell you they're a Chamber member.
Yeah. As long as they pay their dues on time and all that, I'm sure that's
all good,
fine.
all
Yeah,
good.
All good, okay. When we had lunch, you mentioned to me that the way you were raised, was ethnically and culturally rich. And tell us what you mean by that.
Oh, yeah. So when I was asked the question about, in my youth, you know, how I developed into what I learned and what I am, and you know, I can tell you all, in fact, I have two cousins that are sitting here in the third row who've known me since I was a little kid, my two cousins, but we were raised, I was raised Greek, very Greek. My mom was first generation and had been raised in Chicago. My grandparents both had come from Greece. My dad was a Greek and came here with the Marshall Plan after World War II. I'm looking at Mike Rummel in the front here too, who knows this story very well, because we went to Sunday school together. Just saying, really looking around this room gives me goosebumps. But you know, our heritage, and Michael correct me, I'm sure if I'm wrong, but our heritage was that when these families came over, not unlike any immigrant population, they stayed together. And in our case, they stayed around the place of worship. And it was, for me and for Mike, it was North Side. It was by Swedish Covenant Hospital then, St. Demetrius Parish. And we went to Greek school. We learned how to read and write in addition to speaking, because we were raised with our grandparents and the culture was very rich in the culture. And because my father was from Greece, and was an artist, a very talented artist from Greece. And my mother was a very talented musician, a singer, which I know we got into too. But she was raised in Chicago, and her father, who had come over, started as a busboy at a restaurant and ended up being a property owner. The last piece of property that my sister and I sold probably 9 years ago was half an acre at Halstead and Van Buren. And that's the kind of legacy that our cultural upbringing came from, and Mike knows all this very well too. But at any rate, we were raised very, very, very rich in the culture of both our religious experience, but also the language, the way of life, the way we behaved. And it was wonderful to be able to carry that with me all these years. So I've considered it a great privilege. And my mother, who was raised in Amundsen High School, was sent by my grandparents for her last year of high school to something called Ferry Hall. And there is a photograph, and this reminds me, Carol, that what I have to do is bring this photo over here. I have a photo of my mother ice skating at West Park in 1939 with this dapper young man who is wearing his skates, a shirt and tie, a leather jacket, and a fedora. And I want to know who this person is.
Maybe in the room tonight?
Maybe.
Well, yeah, you mentioned your mother was a great singer, and didn't she win a soprano competition at some point, a large one?
Oh, yeah, okay. So going back, and this was, my mom was very, very modest about this, but she was choir director of our church, and she had been a singer for quite a while, had been on the faculty at what we now know as the Chicago, well, it's actually the Chicago College of the Performing Arts at Roosevelt. Then it was Chicago Musical College. And Mom was on the faculty there, but she sang, and there were competitions. There was something before Lollapalooza that was called the Chicagoland Music Festival. And those that are into the cultural history of Chicago will know that this was something that took place in Soldier Field. And I was reading up about it in anticipation of the possibility of this coming up. The first year was in 1930. That's not when my mom was in it, but 1930, and they had 150,000 people either attending or involved. So that it was bands, marching bands, drum corps, soloists, it was everything. And they also had famous people who would come to this too, but they had amateur competitions. And my mom participated in one, and I found this out. She was in her 90s at the end. She lived over here on Westminster. But Mom and I were talking about this, and so she said, "Oh, yeah, I won one of those competitions." I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah." She said it was a soprano competition, and she was a coloratura soprano, which is how I started out too, but not anymore. But at any rate, she won the competition. She won a medal, and didn't make it to the next level to actually perform in the festival. But there were some wonderful things that took place in the city, and my heritage was very rich culturally, very rich.
Right. And you were trained in voice at Boston University. I'm sure your mom had a big influence on that. And have any interest in singing a song for us today?
Oh,
If not, that's okay.
I knew you were going to do that. Well, let me start by saying that I wanted to go to New York. I wanted to go to Juilliard, and my mom basically said no. She said, "You need to get a degree so that you can teach." And I thought, okay, that I needed to get some liberal arts, and I needed to get into that so that I would have a different sort of life than a performer who was always struggling to be on stage. I'm looking at my friend Sue Stevens too, who started in classical music. But it was something that I was told that I should do, and so I did audition at Juilliard and said no to Juilliard, but at any rate, went to Boston University because I loved Boston, and there I studied voice, but I didn't really want to go into opera, and I was impassioned by musical theater, and that had started from my days back at Evanston High School, which is where I was raised. Tina remembers that. Evanston High School, where we had incredible performances, and that's what's so wonderful about the kind of education that the kids get when they get these opportunities, because that's a team sport too. Being in the arts is a team sport, and for all of us, we wanted to go off and do it, and we had those opportunities in high school to be able to make those decisions moving forward. But anyway, so no, I was in musical theater, and as far as singing something,
maybe afterwards?
Afterwards.
After a drink?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That's fine. I'll think of something for you. Yeah.
And then after you graduated from BU, you moved to Colorado, and what did you do there, and why did you move to Colorado?
So I met my husband in Boston, and Bob was in liberal arts, and he was actually a Soviet and East European studies major with a minor in telecommunications. And telecommunications at that time was not what we know now. I mean, that was absolutely amazing. But he wanted to get an advanced degree, and he would have moved anywhere. He said, "Do you want to move to New York? Do you want to audition? And I said, no. What would you like to do?" So he wanted to get a master's at University of Colorado. And so we ended up moving to Boulder at first, where I auditioned for a show at the Bonfi Theater, which then it was the precursor of the Denver Center of the Performing Arts, and did an audition and got a leading role in the show. And so then I kind of didn't do an audition again while I was there. I just kept getting cast in things, which is really kind of a nice place to be when you're in a group that, anyway, it was very fun and I loved it. So Bob was getting his degree and he started working in community building. And he was just an inspiration in that. He started something called the Seniors Resource Center that still exists. And it was consolidation of programs for senior citizens. And he started getting recruited after a few years that we were there. He was getting recruited nationally to do that sort of thing. And for me, I was performing at night. I'm looking at my son Brandon because he was actually in a show with me. It was a crucible, and there was a baby in the crucible, and Brandon played the baby. But at any rate, I had day jobs. You couldn't make a living performing in Denver. It was not an equity town, and you just couldn't make a living doing. So my day jobs, my very first job, listen to this. I got this job 2 weeks after I moved there, and I became the administrative assistant of the Boulder Chamber of Commerce. And maybe that was like meant to be, right? Because it was incredible for me. I'd never known this world, and I just felt so kind of cool. All of a sudden, I could carry a briefcase, and I thought that was very cool. So from there, when I got pregnant and I was going to have a baby, and I announced it to them, and they said, well, you know that at 4 months, you're terminated. And I said, you can't do that anymore. And I did stay until I was 7 months, and then I left, and then I sued them for unemployment. But my next job was with the National Conference of State Legislatures, which was something I knew nothing about, but I was going to be the receptionist, and I was invited to participate in events and this sort of thing. And I was fascinated with everything about that. And it was inspiring. The people were wonderful. Those were the days that there was no internet, so that if a state wanted to put forth a bill about environment, they had to contact something like NCSL to find out what there was going on in other states. And so I was involved with that. I was brought into some grant projects there, and it was great. And I had a friend who was running the marketing department, the national marketing department for NCSL, and she came to me one day and she said, listen, I've taken another job. I'm going to be the director of PR for the Denver Symphony. Do you want to go with me? I went, let me think about it. Yes. So I got to go to the Denver Center of the Performing Arts, where I said, I know nothing about PR. And she said, but you can write and you can do people. And she said, you know what? She said, let me just teach you everything I know, and you can do it with me. And that's what we did. And I have had, I told David this, I have had a life of opportunities that just kept popping up like this that were amazing. And it was opportunities for me to learn a variety of things that I've brought with me all these years. Do you want me to get into that story about the book?
Sure.
Okay.
Let me,
Yeah.
You said there was a transformative book around that time written by Barbara Walters. So yes, definitely tell us how that influenced your life.
Okay, so Baba Wawa. So I think you all remember Barbara Walters in her interviews. Well, one of my roles was doing the program notes. We would get program notes on the pieces that were being performed. That we would get. You pay for those. But when it came to the guest artists, that was something that I did, and it was based on what I would get from the management for the variety of guest artists. And we had some phenomenal artists, and it included Yo-Yo Ma, who lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and that's where I had been, in Boston, and we just had a great time. I mean, but whether it was classical or pops, and the pops, I was like over the moon, because it was people like, well, I'll get to Johnny, but people like Sarah Vaughan and, well, I don't even know, but all sorts of artists. And one of them, I had just finished a show at the Bonfi Theater that had opened on Broadway, and I was cast in the leading role, it was a show called Seesaw. And it's not a classic, but it was written by Coleman, I forgot his first name now, Coleman? Cy Coleman, thank you. All right, Cy Coleman, and who wrote Sweet Charity, and he wrote, did he write Pajama Game? And I don't know if he wrote Pajama Game, but at any rate, he had this string of musicals, and here I had starred in this show at the Bonfi Theater that he had written. So I pick him up at the airport, and those were the days that you could go up to the gate, and you could walk out. And so I waited for Mr. Coleman, and he got off the plane, and he had this lovely woman with him. And I said, "Oh, Mr. Coleman, I just got you one room." And he said, "That would be okay." And I thought, "Oh, you moron." And it didn't get any better. He was in the car with me, and, we were talking about different things, and I'm going on and on, and I'm just such an idiot. And so I said, I was just in a show that you have written. He goes, "Which one?" And I said, "Seesaw." And he said, "Oh, what did you play?" And I said, "Gittel Mosca." And he said, "Oh, I can see it." Well, she is a real ditz. So he saw me as being typecast in it, which was great. Well, after that experience, I thought, you know what? I can't be doing this, because I picked up all the artists. I was responsible for the artists, and I thought, all right, that was quite the lesson, and that was early on in my existence. So as I told Dave, one of my favorite stories, one of the people who was coming next was Johnny Mathis, who was, heartthrob, one of my heroes. I listened to his music, I had his albums, still have the vinyl, as my kids know. At any rate, I thought, oh boy. I got in touch with his management, because they were going to have a women's board event, and the women, anyone, could pay more to be in the theater the night of Johnny Mathis's show, and afterwards be able to come up into the lobby to meet Johnny and all this kind of thing. Well, so I got in touch with his management, and I said, blah, blah, blah. And they said, "He won't do it." I said, "Well, it would only be just for a few minutes. He could just come out and meet the people, and then, no, he won't do it." And I thought, really? I said, well, so I waited and asked them again a week later, and they said, "No, he won't do it." And I said, okay, this guy's a real jerk. And I thought, prepare yourself for this one. So I go to the airport. But meanwhile, what I had done was picked up this book, because I thought, I've got to be better at talking to people than this, And so this book by Barbara Walters was How to Talk to Practically Anybody About Anything.
Practically anything.
Practically anything. Yeah. So I picked up the book, and I would read it as I would commute downtown on the bus. And sure enough, it was just brilliant, because it taught small talk. It taught how to talk to people, but it taught you to research them, so that what you could do is know things about them in advance of meeting them. So I was really prepared for Johnny Mathis, because I thought, oh my God, this is going to be horrific. And it turns out that he had been in Olympic trials. He was track and field, and apparently could have made the Olympics, but he chose his career. And then the other thing was that he had a swimming pool in his living room. And he loved to cook. And I thought, okay, I could do that. So I had those things, and he gets in the car, he gets off the plane, and he is my height. I never, ever thought that. So first of all, I thought, whoa, this is really something. But he's not very tall, and he came off with someone who came with him, and I didn't say anything about only having one room. And we got in the car, and we started talking, and I was asking about his interest in things, and he's really, really shy. That was the situation that I couldn't have anticipated at all from what I had seen on television, the interviews, Johnny Carson show, all that kind of stuff. So any rate, I said to him before we got out of the car at the hotel, would you be willing to come? He said, no, he says, I just hate these things because, and I said, tell you what. I said, my husband's a big guy. And so is Carlos Wilson, who heads up the symphony, is the administrator. I said, how would it be if we took you up the back stairway, you came out, and if you don't want to stay, they'll take you out again. So he said, can I tell you tomorrow? Sure. So the next day, I take him for his interviews, and he gets in the car, and he says, like my boots, I wore these just for you. And we had this little relationship going that was just so cute, and with his friend, and we went and did the interviews, and he was fabulous. And I said, okay, so Johnny, what do you think? So he said, all right, if you promise me that I can leave immediately if it's something that isn't going to be comfortable for me. The performance was unbelievable. The Bonfi Theater, the Denver Center of the Performing Arts, for those who haven't been there, is in the round. It was one of only 4 in the world at the time, and it's extraordinary in there. And sure enough, he comes up as he said he would. We brought him up. The fellows brought him in. I have never seen people climb over furniture before. And true to our promise, he waved, and the fellows took him right out again. But going back to the book, I can tell you that I never would have been able to get to that point with Johnny Mathis or with so many other people over the years, because that's something, and I can get into that later when we talk about best practices now, but being able to talk and converse with people and find things that people have in common with you and with others and connecting them is something that is so important. And she was, and her book were one of those inspirations. And I feel so strongly about that now as I look around the room and I think, I need to introduce you to you and you to you. But there's so many of us in this room that I know practice this, and we're involved in different ways that we can do it. So the book was transformative.
Great. And so you had many years in Boston and Denver, but you decided to come back to the North Shore of Chicago and to get a house in Lake Bluff. And how did that happen?
Oh, so Bob had been recruited by a number of different entities that wanted, because he had made a mark for himself in senior services and in this kind of development of an entity to serve a community. And he had there was one in Philadelphia, they were all over. But he found one that just jumped out at him, and he said, how do you feel about moving back to Illinois? And I said, well, my family was here, my sister, my mother, my grandmother then. And I said, sure. And so he said, this is a job to start a park district for the Round Lake area. And I came with him, and we came back here. And of course, for me, it was circling back and coming home. But for Bob, he went up there, and they had a park district then that was in a storefront on Rollins Road. It was a store. And they had some classes for some of the kids up there. And so Bob, over 15 years, built it so that it represented and included 5 different communities. And it was a model for actually nationally. He ended up going into municipal law after that so that he could represent entities in that. And I don't know if Kathy O'Hara is here. She was going to, okay. Because he also did a lot of, when he got his law degree, he opened an office in Lake Bluff and was doing a lot of pro bono work. So he helped the Lake Bluff History Museum get their space, and he represented them doing that, and a lot of other things in real estate and what have you. So that brought us back here, and it got me here. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And a few years ago, I interviewed someone in Round Lake, and unsolicited, she brought up your husband's name and what a great job he had done in the area. So that was very nice. And then you were a realtor in Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, in the 1980s, and that was before the internet. It was a whole different situation in terms of how to buy a house. So tell us what that was like.
Mary Shaw. All right, so I know there are some realtors in the room, Jan. So back in the 80s, it was a little different because there was no internet. Because if you wanted to buy a house, what you needed to do was A, look in the Pioneer Press, David.
Right.
And David was editor of the Lake Forester at when was that?
2003 to 2012.
Okay.
So the internet existed then.
Okay, it existed. But it was Pioneer Press. There were the wanted ads in the back, there were the classifieds, and that's the way people found their houses. There was a diversions section, and that's the way everybody found out what was in the movies and what was, what was playing and social things and what have you. Any rate, so it was very different. And for those of us who were in the business, there was the MLS book. Do you guys remember the multiple listing service book for those that are, yeah. All right, so it was a book that would come out every 2 weeks that had the photographs and short listings of everything that was on the market, right? And it started with, this was the North Shore book, started with Evanston, then what comes next? Wilmette, Winnetka, Glencoe, Highland Park, Lake Forest, Lake Bluff. And then it would go back down to Skokie. And then what comes after Skokie? We get to Deerfield and Northbrook. And so it had the next tier west of suburbs. And then there would be, I see Bob Shaw shaking his head like this. Then there would be every other week the hot sheets. We would get the hot sheets that would be what actually did close, or the news about this kind of thing. But here's the biggest difference of all, that you couldn't get into a house or see anything about it unless you contacted a realtor, right, Mary? All right, so what happened was, we didn't have phones then either. You had to make all these arrangements before you even went out with the client. And when you were going around, if they saw something that they wanted to see, we didn't have phones. So we had to find ourselves a phone booth, or it had to be another visit. And it was just very interesting, but that was pre-internet, because the internet didn't come into use until 92, right?
Right? In the 90s, yeah.
In the 90s. And I'll tell you just one more thing, since I do have the mic. That there was one pair of clients. They wanted to move to the area. They wanted to move to Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, and I showed them, over the course of several weeks, 72 houses. And then there was one Sunday that I thought, damn it, I am not going to spend another Sunday showing them houses that they're not going to buy. And so I said, you know what? Our family has something going on today. And I said, but I'll talk with you tomorrow. And that day, they went to an open house, and they bought that house from that realtor. And so, those were the kinds of things that was happening. It was just a different business, right? Very different business.
Do you want to name names?
No, thank you.
Well, let's get into what you're doing today. And you applied for the chamber position in 1997. And why did you apply for it? And what was your first day like?
My first day at the chamber. So it was April Fool's Day in 1997. So what led me to it was that there are so many of us in this room that do it. And I when I was first asked if I would be willing to be the local legend, and I said, what? Me? There's so many people who, like me, raise their hands, do things, start things, create things. All these people in the room, everybody does this. Yvonne Bruce with the North Shore Civic Club, all these things that I thought, you know what? I mean, that's what we all did. And I really thoroughly enjoyed that. And it was through schools with the kids. It was out in the community. I worked at Gorton for a while. I was doing programming and publicity. I worked with the Lake Forest Symphony. And then Griffith, Grant, and Lackey. Where's Tom Grant? Here he is. All right. This is Tom Grant, the Grant in Griffith, Grant, and Lackey right here. And I worked with Griffith for 10 years. 10 years, and I thank you so much for that. We used to have our offices up there above Market Square. And it was really something then. But I was going to say that what happened was I knew people in Market Square, the businesses, like Helanders, and some of the others. And I know that the Sterlings are here too. I don't see, they were, okay. Yes, there they are, back there. And, there was Ellen Sterling, Lake Forest Shop. There was all these businesses then that, said to me basically, we're doing some special events. Can you help us organize them? Sure, I loved doing that. Because I had started for the Griffith Grant and Lackey, a home and garden show that was the North Shore Home and Garden Show then. And that's when Griffith Grant and Lackey was a Better Homes and Gardens company, and we got a national award for it and all this stuff. But they said, can you help us with these things? Sure. So I was helping them start things, and then I can't remember who it was who said to me, you know what, the chamber is looking for a director. Would you ever think about that? And I looked at it and I thought, well, sure. If it's doing what I do already, I'd love that. And I was hired for the chamber, and again, my first day was April Fool's Day, 1997. 1997. And I know you said the story about my first day. My first day was a city council meeting, and what was being presented to the city council was a report on the business district. It was a consultants, business district consultants that were hired, and the name of the report was Making a Good Thing Even Better. Doesn't that sound like Foresty of us? Okay, so any rate, making a good thing even better, but it was taking a look at all of the businesses that were in town and what the challenges were, what kinds of things needed to be considered in all of this. And when you look at the names of the businesses in 1997, a lot of you are going to remember them. You're going to remember these businesses. But I'll tell you what was interesting. When it talked about the competition of the businesses, it was big box stores that were opening up, discounters that were opening up, malls that had, were our lifestyle. We would take our kids and be at the mall, and the movie theaters were at the mall. And then something in parens and quotes called the start of internet shopping, 1997. And, we know what happened after that. And that was the start of this.
Right.
That was the start.
And tell us, 97, that's what it was like. The past 25, 30 years, Amazon has gotten huge for online shopping. Costco is just outside of our border. What qualities have you seen in Lake Forest businesses that they've been able to adapt to this changing environment?
I don't think this would surprise any of you, but I think more of it is technology now. Technology and the means of promoting and being able to get the customers and clients, because now that the publications aren't there anymore, you have to find other ways to tell your story. But the other thing was really doubling down on customer service, and that's still the case. So it is customer service. It is actually, making people feel like they need to come into a store to be able to buy something and do something and see something. There was something a while ago now, a few years ago, that was called showrooming, where let's use the late Forest Bouderie as an example. Showrooming is where you could go into a store and you could try on a pair of shoes. You like them, and what you do is with your phone, you can photograph the barcode, and you can find it cheaper online, and you order it. And that was something that was happening, and people are not really thinking about that, but that happens a lot. So those are the kinds of things that the businesses are still up against. But again, very, very important that the customer service is there so that the experience of being in that store and talking to somebody who really knows something is of value.
And if you could talk a little bit about the pandemic, what an impossible time to run a business, but many survived and are still here today. How did you help guide them? How did you help them to sort of keep the doors open during such a turbulent time?
I would say we made ourselves even more available. I have two of my staff back there. Sarah Lockhart and Kirsten is right next to her too. So the two of them. So Sue Cassanda couldn't be here today, but I have 3 wonderful staff, and I'll tell you, what we did was, the guardrails were down. We had to make ourselves available 24/7 to everybody. And we started working remotely. We had to do it. And we just made sure that we were available at all times because they needed to know what was going on. And there were all sorts of changes constantly. So that was something very, very important to us. So I would say that more than anything. And also, again, new technology, Zoom. You know, working on all sorts of things that we needed to in order to make ourselves much more current and maintain clients. And also, we like to say, because alliteration I love, but connection, collaboration, and communication. And those were the 3 things that we practiced and we taught.
Right, right. And what would you say, what's been the best part about being the head of the chamber? Is it dealing with all the great businesses or maybe something beyond that?
You know, looking around the room today, Michael Soselski, who is the brand new president of Lake Forest College, is back there. Right next to Jackie Slatz, who, you know, I've known for a million years because you actually headed up, was it a basketball program that my daughter Steph did? You know, as I look around the Shaws and I look around at people all through here, the Rummels, the former mayor, the Lynches with construction, Susan Kelsey, who has done any number of things and is now doing Little Fort Film Festival, and then, you know, people who have started things, the North Shore Civic Club, I mentioned that with Yvonne, Rick Lesser back there with all sorts of things, who was on the committee when I was hired, as a matter of fact.
One of my 5 best hires.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Rick. But people, and some newer friends too, like Steve Sarowitz here, who started the Wayfarer Theater and is instrumental in getting that going in Highland Park, and which is fabulous. Anyway, what I love about my work and about what I've been able to do is all of you, really. It is having this sense of community and be able to sharing in it and promote it and helping find opportunities. And Diane with the Fisher House that just opened by the Lovell Center. Beautiful, beautiful things. Any rate, as I look at this and I look around, Debbie Saran in the back, all these people, I just love this work. I love the people of our communities. I love the fact that our communities, there's so many people that raise hands and go, I'll do it, or how about if we do this, or you need volunteers, or what can we do? That is our community. So for me to have evolved into a position where I can do this, Mark McMahon and Carolyn McMahon back there, our fabulous artists, when I can evolve into that kind of position, and that is what I do, this is a labor of love. This isn't work. This is something that I really enjoy. So it's been a privilege and a pleasure for me.
Perfect. And do you have a favorite story you'd like to share, whether humorous or serious, just about your days as the head of the chamber? Anything come to mind about something you dealt with that was especially noteworthy, I guess?
Well, all right. So I would say after 9/11, when there was, well, we all know what happened after 9/11. Everything was just so tremendously disrupted. And I remember that United Way could not raise money. They were losing money. There was so much need, and they wanted to do this. And I had been getting involved from the day I came to Lake Bluff with Center Stage, which was the wonderful community theater group that we've had here in town. And we have wonderful arts groups in town. But we talked about the fact that there must be a way that we can do something fun and funny. And of the late friend of mine, Bob Banks, said, let me help you. And we put together a show that we called Community Capers. That was just intended to be a fun evening of taking songs, rewriting them, making fun of things around town, and charging admission for it, and we did, and we had sponsors, and for that performance, we made $20,000. We had 3 performances, we made $20,000 that we gave to United Way. Well, it completely wore us out, and, but it was so wonderful, and it was such a great way to be able to give something back. 2009, 11, and 13 rolls around, and I'm looking at Elaine here, who was in all of those shows. And Center Stage did it with us this time, and we did it 3 more times. And the Rotary Club participated with us 1 year, and we made the proceeds of it available for Croya, the seniors, and there were some different programs. And for that one, we made $60,000. And then we did 2 more of them and didn't make quite as much on those, but boy, did we have fun. And boy, was it fun to make fun of everything in town. Whether it was banks that were popping up like tulips for a while, or it was, remember the pig? Remember the pigs? Okay, somebody who had pigs. It was taking down Marshall Fields. It was the smoking ban. All of a sudden, you couldn't smoke in a restaurant anymore. And there were any number of things. We had such a good time. So I'd say that was something really, really fun for us. We had a great time doing that.
Sounds like it, definitely.
Yes. And I think maybe it's time for another one. Just saying.
True. Yeah, let's do it. Great idea. Anyway, you've done really well answering my very tough questions. But now I want to open it up to the audience. Who has some questions for Joanna? Yes.
It's not really a question. I adore Joanna Rolek, absolutely. But I think her greatest accomplishment is this crown day that is right here at the terminal, that in the midst of everything else that she has accomplished, she has really amazing.
So that is so sweet, Elaine. All right, Elaine and Jim Upsitnik. So my son Brandon and his wife Brooke and his very best friend since they were 5, Kevin Comstock. These were the 2 guys on Ravine Forest Drive in Lake Bluff. Kristen Rolek, Stephanie Rolek, and this is little Bailey Rolek, whose parents are sitting there. Bailey, wave to everybody. All right. So Bailey is learning how to sing, dance, and act, which makes me very happy. Oh, maybe she can sing. Yes, perhaps she can. Yeah.
Exactly.
Any rate, thank you, Elaine. Yeah, but I'm very happy for that.
Yes.
All right, so I know that you never let anything slow you down, and you're currently working with me on another project, the Arts Link North. Do you want to share with everybody?
Oh my gosh, of course I do. Yes, okay. So go back to, this started 12 years ago. And the arts and cultural entities, we had 17 in the chamber at the time. And it included the museums, it included the libraries, it included theater, music, dance, a little of everything. So what we decided to do, just because it's my passion, can't help myself, we started something that we called Arts Link. And it was intended to be an opportunity for everybody to work together. Very important, because one didn't know what the other one was doing, and they would play things very close to the vest because they kind of felt like they were competing for the same people in the seats and everything else, and that wasn't really the case. Anyway, it was fabulous. Fast forward, I mean, we had business participation, it was great. Fast forward to COVID. Everything, of course, stopped. And when that happened, 2 years later, one of the people, it was Scott Phelps of the Citadel Theater, called me up and he said, "We've got to do this again." And so I said, "Sure, okay, let's pull together a group and let's talk about it." So we pulled together a group, but this time what happened was, the idea being it would be something to promote the arts. It started being, we had more people at the table, so that we had Ravinia at the table. We had the Marriott Lincolnshire at the table. We had the Wayfarer Theater from Highland Park at the table. We had all these different entities, the Genesee Theater out of Waukegan, and they were going, "We'd like to work on this too." So what we did was, and Carol is the treasurer of our board, I'm the president of the board, we have others who are involved, but everybody just jumped on board and wanted to do this. And Sue, thank you for being a sponsor for us. And what we did was we created a website And in fact, thank you for reminding me, Carol, because I asked her if she could print up some of the flyers that she made up that are gorgeous. They're on the counter on your way out. But if you go to artslinknorth.com, you will find a calendar of events and interactive opportunity to find out everything that's going on in Lake County. We now have 57 groups that are in it. So when I look at something that I am so proud of, I would say that it's what we were able to accomplish with this. And that's Arts Link North. So I would say by all means, take a look at that and make sure that you take advantage of it and look for things to do that way. We're getting more and more people on it and making sure that everybody's on it and all their events are on it and what have you. So yeah, thank you, Carol. Very important.
Anyone else have a question? Yes.
I have to say, I was at Community Capers so many years ago. I never forgot it. It was the funniest show, and I was so incredibly taken with you. It must have been 2008 because the scenes were all about everybody being broke. You know what happened? That one act is what I never forgot. And you were the star, and you had a sidekick with you. But anyway, you slithered on stage and lying down as a raccoon. Yes, and your sidekick was another raccoon. And you got up to the garbage can. And you sang, maybe this is your song. But you sang, the two of you, it was a love song. And you sang, you don't bring me garbage.
That's right. That's right. That's right. And that was, what a good memory you have. So that was a reprieve because there was something called Centennial Follies in Lake Bluff. And those who lived in Lake Bluff remember this. Centennial Follies, and this was written for me, or for us. It was Tom Beck. And we were raccoon parents who were teaching our kids how to forage in the garbage cans. And my song, when you talk about song, all right. Garbage, all alone in the moonlight. That was the song. That was the song. Yeah. Yeah. So you know what? Making fun of all that stuff was just way too much fun. And you know what? I think we need to laugh a little more now. I think we need to poke fun at ourselves and really do something that we can enjoy, right? So looking for script ideas. We'll do it again.
Anyone have any more questions? Yes.
I'd like to know what you see as your biggest challenge going forward.
That's a good one, Jan. I'd say the biggest challenge going forward is to stay on top of changes, to be able to evolve with what is happening out in the world. Technologically goes without saying. I think the other thing is it's in terms of programming for so many of us. Programming, it's about how to best connect with clients and customers. That changes all the time. And as more virtual as relationships have become, that's even more difficult for those who are boots on the ground and who have storefronts or who have arts entities or whatever it might be. Very difficult. So that's something that we need to stay on top of, and I think more than anything we need to have opportunities to talk to people. I've heard this talked about so much, especially this week, the need to be out amongst each other and to be able to mingle. And Jan, I know, comes to an event that we have every month with the Chamber. It's called Before Work. And this is an event where we invite people to come, and I do a few announcements at the beginning and then pass the microphone around, and everybody introduces themselves. They have 45 seconds, which actually is a good amount of time, to be able to talk about themselves, and then we give them time to meet and mingle afterwards. And that is something that we need to be able to do. And also when it comes to students, whether it's students at the high school or students at the college level, we're working on some wonderful career programs to show them what life is like after academia. And so those are programs that I think are very important for us, but also to teach them how important it is, teach them about first impressions, and that you have 7 seconds to make a first impression now. That's what they tell you. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite activities was actually done with high school kids, and this is a few years ago. It was a Saturday where it was like you were at a conference, and the students could pick from what they wanted to go hear or see during that time slot, kind of like when we go to conferences and you can do that. And I was asked to do one, and I did one about networking. And so the students came in, and I said, okay, so, how many of you talk with me, blah, blah, blah. So we talked a little bit, and I said, okay, so I'm going to try something with you. And I said, this is going to be, you need to put together 3 people who are going to be a committee with you to create a paper that is going to be the bulk of your grade for this class. I'm going to show you slides of some people that it could be your choices. These are some people, and you pick and choose who it is you want to be on your team. And so I intentionally spent 7 seconds on each image. So there was an image of, a studious girl who was doing something. Another image of somebody who was obviously a class clown. Another one who was, somebody who, I can't remember now, but it was different people. And then afterwards I said, okay, I'm going to show them to you again. Raise your hands and tell me if these are the people who you want on your team. And so they're raising their hands and they're showing who they wanted to be on the team. And I said, and what are you basing this on? And they kind of went, well, they looked like they were somebody. And I said, you saw them and you got to know them for 7 seconds. And that's it. And I said, that's kind of the point. That is your whole impression of those people, 7 seconds. And how does that feel, and how does that make you feel, and what do you think you have to do about that? And it was a great conversation after that, but that's so important. And nowadays, that's all we've got, if that. So that's a big challenge, I think, right now, is knowing how to do what we do well going forward.
Perfect. And I think we're all set. Carol, would you like to do the honors?
I thought that was a lovely spot to wrap up on. And as this is an award ceremony, there are awards. So Amy is one of our co-chairs and on my board, and I'm going to give it to her to just present.
Joanna, we wanted to present this to you in honor of your many contributions to our community. We were so proud to have you as our local legend, and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much.
And then we have something for David for his work here. And I just want to say thank you to all who've come out, all of the sponsors who help support this event. We are entirely beholden to the contributions of this community to keep us moving forward, and our partnerships across all the various organizations. But our partnership with Joanna has been incredibly meaningful, and as you've all witnessed, she is a woman of many, many talents. So thank you so much for agreeing to be our local legend. It was very well deserved.